What's going on, everybody? Long time no talk. So for those of you that have been waiting for an update, knowing that I probably haven't been sitting around doing nothing with the car, I apologize it's taken so long. If there's one thing I've learned over the past bunch of months, it's I can't film and document a build in process. Especially the way that this one went was relatively stressful with regards to timing and schedules being blown, and I was generally pissed off about the process the vast majority of the time, and people don't want to see videos where I tell you, yep, it's delayed or whatever, and bitch and moan about it. So let's talk about where the car is now and kind of what has happened since you guys last saw it. The goal over the winter was to really get the chassis to a point where I could say it was developed within my budget to the best potential that I could get it. That's really the goal for the season. We have another phase coming for next season, but this season was really specifically devoted to chassis development. The car, if you watch the videos, was pretty fast last year. And so, it's not a lot of low-hanging fruit to make it better, but that was really what the attempt was. So just to kind of go with what the overall goals for improvement were with regards to that chassis development side, it was front-end grip. So what can I do to maximize the amount of front-end grip? A really fun aspect, a rewarding aspect of driving this car and learning how to drive it better is it's generally really easy to drive and provides you with a lot of feedback. If you get on the gas too early, you get push in the front. The front tires can't grip. It's got a ton of grip in the back, so really you can get on the gas whenever you want, full beans, and you don't have to worry too much about the back. So knowing that that was the case, the more grip that I could put in the front, I figured the more flexibility, the more margin for error it will give me with regards to my driving and still being able to be fast. Also, if you notice or paid attention to the development of the Cup cars over the course of the generations, you'll see one thing that they have constantly done with each generation is go bigger in the front tire. So, they do that for a reason. So improve the front end grip. That's a big one with regards to the chassis development. Another one was safety. So as the car transitions and becomes more of a focus tool to do one thing well, and that's perform well at the track, I wanted to not have a nagging thought in the back of my head like the car wasn't set up from a safety standpoint to do all that it could do or that I could make it do as a driver. And that couples with the chassis development because putting a roll cage, one that's integrated into the chassis, stiffens up the chassis and changes the dynamics of it. So we'll move on to, I think that kind of covers the goals. As much front end grip as we can get and have a good platform with which to develop the chassis. So we'll talk about the changes. Starting off where there was very few, and that's in the powertrain. So the motor, the gearbox, the LSD have all remained relatively unchanged. That stuff all worked pretty good, relatively reliably, so I haven't messed with any of that. That's just maintenance and making sure that it's in a position to keep doing what it was doing and allow me to develop the chassis and put that seat time in. So moving on from there, I guess we'll go kind of to the exterior. The wheels are the same, so you'll see I have two different wheels on. We'll get to that in a minute. So I'm still running E88s, 1811 in the back, and part of the chassis development, I'll pick you up and you'll walk with me a bit. In that effort to get front grip was to go to a 275 front, which is what you see here. And in order to facilitate that, I rebuilt the wheels from the 18 by 9 that they were to an 18 by 9.5. So that was just a change of the outer lip from 1 inch to 1.5 inches. Great thing about E88s, beyond the fact that they are the GOAT of wheels, is that you have that flexibility to rebuild them and resize them and change offsets. Specifically with regards to the front, if you know a 911 and you've tried to fit big tires up front, there's a lot of space in the fender well. Where you end up running into issues is space with the coil spring. And I was already on the hairy edge of that before, and I was running a 5mm spacer with the Öhlins previously. As we get into the changes, I'll get more into detail on the suspension, but I ran a smaller spring on the new suspension setup, a smaller diameter, so it's I want to say it's 2¼ inches instead of 2½ inches in diameter. So that allowed me just to move basically the wheel outboard, take advantage of more of that room in the fender, and not impact the room to the spring at all by not changing the rear barrel. All right. So that's kind of tires. Same, still running NT01s with 305s in the back, and as mentioned, the 275s in the front. With regards to fitting the tires in the front, where you run into issue is in the fender liners. Even though this is a 35 profile tire instead of the 40 or 45s that most people run, when you get the car down at a low ride height, you start to get into the fender. This car definitely has that, and at the track it was very manageable, but this is not in a position where you would be able to drive it every day and maneuver in and out of parking lots and shit like that. So if that's what you're aiming for, 275 may be a little bit much without getting into like some re-engineering of the rad buckets and fender liners and other stuff probably. So right now I've got about 3/4 of a lock of turn. That's pretty good, and then more than that it starts to get into the fender well a little bit. So we're going to let them probably self-clearance a little bit as we go, but it's got enough lock for the track right now. So that's the wheel and tire. So moving on, getting more into kind of the nuts and bolts of the changes. Something that I fixed that really wasn't broken was the front brakes. So I got it in my head that I wanted to put big 6-piston calipers and big rotors on. I found a kit from a guy in the UK that makes a bracket to adapt 380mm discs and 6-piston 997.2 GT3 calipers to the hub of a C2. So I went and had found a cheap set of calipers, relatively speaking, and that was one of the first parts that I bought before the winter, and the guy's kit, and that setup has bolted on and worked relatively well. Now what's kind of weird is if we move on and take a look at the rear, I'm running the stock C2 rears, and it looks funny, but beyond the fact that it looks funny, the reasoning behind that is what has been relayed to me and seemed like it made sense was that the bias, the front to rear brake bias, was predominantly set by the piston area per caliper. So regardless of how many pistons it has, if you add up the total piston area that a caliper has, and then you take that as a ratio from front to rear, that is predominantly what your bias is going to be set at. My original plan was to go and run the stock C2 front caliper in the rear, thinking, yeah, bigger is better, right? Great. Well, when I had started to get into that with people who know more about this than me, and they had cautioned, hey, make sure that you have an idea of how that's going to affect the bias. So doing some researching and math, it ended up that the piston area of the 6-piston GT3 caliper is only very marginally bigger than the piston area of the stock C2 front. So if we were to use that theory that the brake bias is predominantly set by that piston area ratio front to back, if I just bolt the GT3 calipers up, we induce very little change in that overall ratio by leaving the stock brakes in the back. So this was really a theory that I hadn't seen a lot of people that had messed with it, at least people that I had trusted, to be able and to tell me, yeah, do this. So the original, it seemed like least risky plan was run the GT3 calibers, keep the stock stuff in the back, which is what I did. And I've run one day. That footage is up, and you can go watch that if you haven't. And the bias felt fine. The brakes didn't do anything weird. I didn't get any locking in the fronts or the backs. That was unexpected. No ABS issues. So this setup works pretty well. That I know. Now, I didn't utilize it to the extent that I did previously last season, where I got really comfortable being pretty aggressive on the brakes, like negative 1.5 G's consistently on the brakes. So lacking confidence just in the overall setup. As we go over more of the changes, you'll see there's a lot of them that were made. It took some time, and 3 sessions wasn't quite enough for me to get to the point where barreling down the front straight at Thompson at 125, I was willing to push another 3 or 4 miles an hour out of her before getting on the brakes without having that kind of experience where the trust has been earned. But I feel a lot better about that now. So next time out, we'll definitely push them a little bit harder. Brake pad setup is the same pads I ran last year, DTC 60s by Hawk. They're affordable, they're predictable. I've gotten really good performance out of them. Right now, it's a good stable part of my braking system. I don't plan on changing it until I get into a point where I'm ready to really do development into what pad may work best. For right now, we're not there quite yet. And then I run Castrol SRF fluid, which is the only fluid that I put in the brakes, and it's expensive and it's kind of Gucci, but that's what I started using at the recommendation of people that know a lot more about this stuff than I do, and it ain't broken, so that's what I continue to run. So I think that's a pretty good rundown on the brakes. The rotors specifically, so they're C-Bros front and back. A big downside of the 380 millimeter rotor setup is they're fucking ridiculously expensive, and there's not a lot of good sources from them. So if you were gonna go balls deep and go this route, buy them from FCP Euro, buy the rotors is what I did so that I can get free replacements. These are the cross drilled, not my preference, so I know they'll develop cracks around the holes, and I want to be able to swap them out without having to take it, get kicked in the nuts every time. So bought them from FCP Euro. C-Bros, trusted, I like them, but I don't like the cross drilled. And then in the rear, same C-Bro slotteds that I ran last year. So again, very setup that's worked for me, know what I should be able to get out of it. So that's the brakes. You can see another downside. So I want a second set of wheels so that I can have something that I can throw some regular street tires on for wets. Because so few wheels in 18 inches will clear the 380 millimeter setup, the E88s, thank God, are one of them. It necessitated those second set of wheels being a 19. So I left these on just so you could get a good view of just how big the setup is, and it's ridiculous. It looks pretty awesome though. I gotta give you that. So, all right, so moving on. So let's talk about the outside of the car. So we talked chassis development. Weight reduction is a big one. We want to shave weight to the greatest extent that we can. You'll see I added a shitload of weight with cage in the car. That's a main reason why. But lighter weight, easier for the motor to do its job, easier for the brakes, easier for the suspension. Easier for the tires, better all around. So I went as far as I could afford on weight reduction. So we'll start with the hood. So I found a carbon fiber hood on eBay, made the guy an offer, ended up picking it up. So this, I believe, was a 20-pound savings over stock. Obviously painted back. The big ones. So these are 996 cup carbon fiber doors. These doors weigh about 12 pounds each, and the weight savings over stock is about 90 pounds. So you can't feel them because you're not fucking here, but if you could feel just how light the door is, it is just absolutely silly. So no windows in these. I have some homemade Lexan windows that we put on principally for transport, and then I went and I flocked the inside of them to make them look nicer than they did, which was pretty shitty. We can see no sunroof anymore. So this is a Porsche factory GT3 roof. I bought this from Porsche and had a body shop bond it on and paint it. So it's factory steel part. It was a third the price of the carbon version that you can get, like the cheapest carbon version that you can get. So for me, the extra couple pounds probably wasn't worth it. I don't know the exact weight savings of this. I would guess it's somewhere in like the 20 to 25 pound range if I had to be relatively conservative about it. Moving on back. So all of the glass has been replaced with Lexan. I made all this stuff. It was all made with the intent to be relatively removable. As I had the car for so long without glass in it, I found it was so nice to be able to work on it without the glass. You know, just a million different things, not just the things I would have thought of. So making the glass relatively removable. So the side quarter windows are secured by these Zeus latches. So these just unlatch them, undo that M5, slide the window out, put it back in. It's a 3-minute process. It allows easy access to the damper remote reservoir, which is in the back. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute when we go over the suspension. And then the rear is another piece of Lexan that I made. And again, this is secured with riv nuts and M5 hardware. And I added 2 aluminum stays that are connected both to the chassis as well as to the window to try to minimize some of the buffeting that occurs on these. And that hopefully will keep stress principally off of the, main fasteners that are running, securing the window. Excuse me. All right. All of the guts in the rear bumper have been removed. So all of the heat shielding, the bumper bar, gone. So you can see when you take all that shit out, there's very little support. So this is all something that's going to have to be worked on because I think the bumper right now is acting as a big giant parachute and not really doing much else. But it did stay nicely affixed for the one track day we've done so far. Same carbon fiber deck lid, same wing, just painted black. So we're principally mostly one color. And then when we get into the interior as far as weight reduction stuff, let's grab a light so that you can see a little bit better. So the inside has gone full-on race car. We have removed the heater core. There's no longer a heater core in it. There's very little under the dash. It's held on by, I think, 4 screws. Or what else? The wiring harness has been thinned. I'll take some pictures of that and show you guys what a shit show that was. I'm not sure if you can see back at the fuse box. Let me see if I can get a light on that. But we're down to not that many fuses compared to where you're starting one of these. So a lot of the electrical has been trimmed out. Right now there's one seat in it because that's how it was corner balanced, but I have the other seat. So if you catch me and want to go for a ride, we could throw the seat in. So, of course, no headliner. So I think that covers most of the weight reduction stuff. So while we're in here, we'll talk about kind of the safety stuff, which principally is inside the car. So getting a roll cage in the car was something I wanted to do. It's an investment. It's for the long term. And I was pretty particular about what I wanted in the design. So I went to a fabricator in Connecticut, Ratty Fab, gave him the prints of what it was that I wanted, and he went ahead and turned it into reality. So some cool aspects of this, it's really modeled off of like a 991 style cup cage with regards to the general layout, and we made some small changes here and there. So what we have is, starting at the front, we've got a bar that connects to the front firewall through a chassis plate, and that moves back and goes to the front of our down bar, which also has a dash bar, which you can see running behind it. As we go up through the A-pillar, we've got at least what I call an FIA bar, this down bar, which falls into two really nice gussets down where it meets at the bottom of the A-pillar. And then our X bars are really nicely kicked out, so it's kind of hard for me, I think, to show you this, but let's see. As you can see, the big cutout in the door, so that fits so nicely in there, so it really maximizes the ingress and egress room and makes it not too bad. As we move into the back, we can see our main hoop. Just up top, we have the two bars that run from the corners of the front bar, and they run down into a number of additional supports. So what's cool about this is you can see pretty much every bar lands at a node and is supported by other bars, which is really the right way to do these cages, and what you can look at pretty quickly to be able to tell if the person who builds it knows what they're doing or not. We've also got a couple of sill bars that I added because I'd like to have this car do hill climbs, and that intrusion in the lower area was something that was pretty important to me to have. It's all painted in Steelit, so I didn't paint the whole inside of the chassis, just the cage, and the cage builder took care of that. He did a pretty good job. Steelit is really cool to work with. You can weld right through it, supposedly. The fabricator told me that he did try it, and it worked out pretty well, just for shits and giggles. But it's nice for me because it's very easily available. You can buy it on Amazon or from Steelit on the internet. So if you need to do touch-ups, you scratch it or whatever, it's very easy to get. So that was a big one for me, and I wanted silver because I thought it would be blingy and look cool. So that's about it. Most of the rest of the interior stayed similar. We put a full-time fire system in, again, for the safety, race car stuff, want to make it safe, and then just did a delete panel to house the buttons. Another piece of electronics that went in the inside was the kill switch is all electronic, so this is a solid state kill, no big red lever to throw. You can do it with a button. Both the fire button and the fire system that can be activated from the inside both have outward triggers as well, so you can see those mounted on the cowl. All right, so suspension. So while a lot of the suspension stayed principally the same, the big upgrade, one of the major upgrades for the winter was I went to a set of JRZ RS Pro 3s, so a three-way adjustable damper with much beefier spring rates. I'm running 1100 in the rear and 900 in the front as a starting area. These are going to take me a little while, I think, to figure out. So I had them set up by Anzi Suspensions, who was really nice to work with, really good guy, took an interest in the project, is providing me a lot of support forward going. So I'm excited to work with him and really refine this, because it's not something that is necessarily just going to work out of the box. And I think I found in my first day, I've got to put a little more investment in to really get the full investment out that I put in. So it's, it's not just turnkey and go. The Olins were great. No complaints about them. But when multiple people told me, hey, the combination of your driving and the way that the car has a lot of potential to be faster, and if you really want to get there, going to a three-way damper is something you're gonna do at some point. And knowing that I wanted to develop the chassis into something that was ready for my next phase, and I didn't really have to worry about it that much while I tackle another big project in the future. It seemed like it was a good time to do it, where I could devote a lot of time and effort and energy and track time into getting that set up to where it's pretty well sorted, knowing it will take time and laps to be able to do that, and me just learning and getting better as a driver. So, yep, what everybody likes about a set of remote reservoirs are the reservoirs themselves. So the rears are mounted on the roll bar, and the fronts are mounted on the tub. And these mounts were made for me by a guy off the Renless forum, Yaz. Super cool guy. I asked him, I showed him roughly what it was that I wanted, and he made this idea into a real part. Okay, so that covers the suspension. Other than that, it was like a refresh of stuff, like replace some ball joints, get it corner balanced and aligned. I'll post that setup sheet for anybody that wants to take a look at it. But yeah, not a lot of changes other than the huge elephant in the room damper change. So I think lastly we'll talk about aero. So the rear is pretty much what it is. Needs a little bit of updating with the bumper. And in the front, in preparation for the future changes that I'm going to make, I went and mounted a 996 turbo bumper, which I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see here. But I'll put some pictures in so you can see what it looks like in real life. I coupled that with a set of dive planes from Joe Toth and the splitter that Joe makes. That's two-piece. So here you can see the lower or upper section. This is cool because with this lower section I'm about to show you removed, it gives you another inch or two of height to where you can get it on and off a trailer or drive it on the road. So that part accepts this guy that's up on the wall. So this just takes really nice Zeus fasteners. So you just plug that guy down underneath that, throw the Zeus in, and you're good to go, ready to rip. Really nice setup by Joe. He makes good parts, and I like him. So if you can send business his way, tell him the guy who bought some turbo stuff and some C2 stuff sent you. So that's about it. This has been a long video, and I didn't want to go and do a ton of edits and spend a lot of time. There was some other, knickknacks, and telling you it seems like a lot less work than I actually did. But if anybody has any questions or wants to see anything more in depth, feel free to throw it in the comments. I will take time and make more video. I did think that was kind of cool. I flocked the dash. So it was something I wanted to do for a long time, and had the opportunity to do it. So yeah, one of those things didn't have to be done, doesn't make the car go faster, but I just thought it was cool. And also on that note, I put a rain light in the rear bumper because why not? So yeah, thank you for the people that waited and are interested in seeing what I did to the car. And for those people, I'm sorry that it took so very long to get you anything on it. I'll have, now that I'm not working on it to the extent that I have been, I'll be hopefully putting some more videos up, and especially if they're targeted into stuff that you guys that really like the videos and like the car want to see. Those would be the types of videos I want to make. I'll keep throwing track stuff up, and hopefully you'll get to see the car go a lot faster over the course of the season. I have lofty goals. I'd like the car to be pretty fast for a car that probably only makes 260 horsepower. And my yardstick is really a lap at Thompson. It's my home track, and it's where I'm going to spend most of my time developing the car this season, which is a relatively short season. We're at the beginning of July now, and I've got one track day under my belt. So not where I want it to be from a time perspective, but it's where I'm at. So hopefully the few of you that enjoy watching the videos enjoy the catch up on this one. Thank you for being interested in the build, and those of you that reached out and said, hey, throw up some content on the car. We want to know what you're doing. you guys are awesome. That's the reason that I'm making the video. So, yeah, hit me up with questions, what you want to see videos on, if anything, and I will get those out for you folks. So, long video. Oof, this is going to be a big one. Thank you for watching. If you stuck around this far into the video, you are a fucking trooper. I will talk to you guys again soon. Thanks.